Alright, I'll start with the first part of the story. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am. Jennifer and I have been married for 10 years, and honestly, I always thought we had a pretty solid relationship. Sure, everyone hits rough patches, but I believed we were in it together, building something real. We met back in high school. She was the popular girl. I was the shy kid, and somehow we clicked. I was crazy about her and she played the part of the perfect wife, at least that's what I thought. We had our routine: work, home, occasional date nights and family gatherings. Honestly, things felt stable, even if a little predictable. But about 6 months ago, I started noticing little changes. She'd come home later than usual, often with some excuse about work commitments or hanging out with the girls. She'd get defensive if I asked questions, brushing it off with that bitchy tone she's perfected, like I'm some kind of annoyance rather than her husband. Then came the little things. She started dressing up more often, wearing new perfume, and her phone was glued to her hand more than usual. She'd hide it whenever I entered the room, so I'd catch her sneaking glances at her screen, quickly closing apps or messages. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I could feel something was off. I tried to ignore it, thinking maybe I was just paranoid. But then 2 weeks ago, I found her hiding her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She left it on the table while she went to the kitchen, and I noticed a string of messages that made my stomach turn. It was her chatting with someone named Alex, a guy from her high school days, I later found out. The messages were flirty, full of inside jokes and plans to meet up soon. That's when the alarm bells really went off. I remember feeling angry, confused, and betrayed all at once. I never imagined she'd cheat, especially not with someone I knew from back in the day. But what cut deep was how she lied about everything, saying she was just catching up with old friends, how innocent it all was. She looked me straight in the eyes and told me I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, and that I was being possessive, that I was imagining things. I didn't buy it, not then, but I didn't confront her right away. I needed more proof, some kind of confirmation that I wasn't crazy. And so I started watching. I stayed up late, checked her phone when she was asleep, and even followed her one night when she said she was going out with the girls. I saw her meet Alex in a parking lot, laughed with him, kissed him. Yeah, kissed him. That was the moment I knew for sure that my wife was cheating on me. It hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe it. After everything we'd been through, after all the plans, the vacations, the quiet mornings and birthday surprises, she was out there, lying to my face, sneaking around with someone I knew. Someone she used to call her best friend back in high school. I hadn't even seen it coming, not until I caught her red-handed. The betrayal was staggering, and honestly, I was furious. But I also felt broken, like I'd been hit by a truck, left wondering how I'd missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind. I knew I had to act. I wasn't going to let this slide, not without some kind of response. But I also knew that I needed to process everything first, to figure out what I really wanted from this mess. All I can say is that my world changed that night, and I'm still trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. Let me know if I should continue with the next part. Got it. Here's the second part of the story. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. My mind was racing, replaying everything I saw the night before: the way Jennifer met up with Alex, the kiss, the way she looked at him like he was the only person in the world. I kept asking myself how she could do this, how she could lie so convincingly, call me her husband, and still go out and cheat. It's like I didn't even know her anymore. All the little things suddenly made sense. The late nights, her defensive attitude, the way she'd snap at me for no reason. She was hiding something and I just didn't want to see it. I tried to act normal that morning, but it was impossible. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I decided I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know. I needed to confront her, get some answers, no matter how ugly it would get. So I did what any angry, betrayed husband would do. I waited until she was in the shower, then I snuck into her purse, found her phone, and scrolled through her messages again. I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't losing my mind. And I was. The messages with Alex were still there, more explicit, more revealing. They'd even planned a weekend getaway, just the two of them. That was the final nail in the coffin. I was furious, my chest clenched, my blood boiling. I paced around the living room trying to think clearly. I knew I couldn't just go off and scream at her right then. I had to plan my move carefully. When she came out of the shower, I calmly told her I needed to talk. She looked annoyed, but I kept my cool. I told her I knew about the messages, about her affair with Alex. Her face twisted with anger, that bitchy smirk she puts on when she's trying to lie her way out of something. She denied it all at first, of course, said I must be mistaken or that I was paranoid. She called me crazy for even thinking she'd cheat. She said I was controlling, that I didn't trust her, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. I lost it then. I told her I'd seen enough, that I'd been watching her for weeks. I told her I wasn't stupid and that I knew exactly what she was doing, that her lies didn't work anymore. Her reaction was classic. She snapped back at me saying I was a jealous idiot, that Alex was just an old friend and that I was blowing everything out of proportion. She called me insecure and immature. Her words cut deep, and I felt like I was barely holding it together. I couldn't believe she was sitting there lying so blatantly, like I was some sort of fool. The confrontation ended with her storming out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I sat there numb, trying to process what just happened. I felt a swirl of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal, a deep sense of loss. I thought about all those years we'd spent together, all the trust I'd given her, and now it felt like it was all a lie. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying everything. The thought of her and Alex, the betrayal, it crushed me. I kept asking myself how I could have missed all the signs, how I hadn't seen it coming. I kept wondering if I was somehow to blame, if I was just a bad husband. But deep down, I knew I was. She chose to lie, to cheat, to betray the vows we made. And I was left here, trying to figure out what to do next. I knew that I couldn't stay quiet forever. I also knew I had to decide whether I wanted to forgive her or if I had enough. Part of me still loved her, still wanted to believe there was a way to fix this. But another part just wanted to tear everything apart and get revenge. I didn't have a plan, but I knew I wouldn't let her get away with it without some kind of consequence. That's the thing about betrayal. Once you know, everything shifts. Nothing's the same anymore. Let me know if I should move on to part 3. Understood. Here's the third part of the story. The days that followed were a blur of anger, confusion, and a strange sense of numbness. I stayed home from work that week, just pacing around the apartment, trying to process what I'd uncovered. Every time I saw her face on the couch or heard her voice, I felt this burning rage. I kept asking myself how she could be so cold, so indifferent to everything we had. All those years, all the moments I thought mattered, gone, replaced by some stupid fling with Alex from high school. I started thinking about revenge. I'd never considered myself a vindictive person before, but this situation flipped something inside me. I wanted her to feel what I was feeling: betrayed, humiliated, used. I wasn't planning to just walk away quietly. No, I wanted her to regret every lie, every sneer, every moment she thought she could get away with cheating on me. That's when I started laying the groundwork. I knew she'd have her phone with her all the time, so I installed a few discreet tracking apps. I wanted to know exactly who she was talking to, where she was going, what she was planning. I also started digging into Alex's background, found out he was married too, with kids. That just made me angrier. How could they both be so selfish? I wanted to expose her, make her see that I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. One night I decided to follow her. She said she was meeting friends, but I had a feeling it was more. I tagged along at a distance, parked a few blocks behind her. She went into a fancy restaurant downtown, a place I'd never even been invited to. She was there for hours with Alex, laughing, touching each other casually like they were lovebirds. Watching from afar, I felt the blood drain from my face. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just talking, they were cuddling, leaning into each other, practically making out in that crowded restaurant. That was it. The full picture was crystal clear now. They'd been lying to my face for months, sneaking around, pretending everything was normal. And I realized I couldn't keep pretending either. I needed to act too. Make her feel the weight of her actions. Next, I started preparing my revenge plan. I didn't want to destroy her completely, but I wanted her to understand that I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I bought a small hidden camera, something discreet I could place where I knew she'd be. I wanted to record her and Alex together, to have proof I could use if I decided to confront her directly. I also contacted a private investigator friend I knew just to get a second opinion on how to handle this. I knew I had to be careful. I had to make sure I had concrete evidence before going all in. Meanwhile, I kept the act of being normal. I still cooked dinner, went to work, kept up appearances, but inside I was boiling. Every time I saw her, I felt this mix of hatred and heartbreak. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd let it get this far. How I'd missed the signs, how I'd trusted her all these years. It made me question everything, my judgment, my worth, our entire marriage. And then it hit me, if I was going to do this, I had to be smart. No rash moves, no impulsive confrontations. I needed to gather everything, have my ducks in a row. I wanted to catch her in the act, show her that I wasn't blind, and then decide what to do next. Because at this point I knew I couldn't stay silent. I was done being the naive husband. I was ready to take control, even if it meant breaking everything apart. The next few days were intense. I set up the camera in the right spot, watched her every move, and kept my ears open. I knew this was just the beginning. The fallout was coming, and I'd be ready for it. Let me know if I should proceed with part 4. Here's the fourth part of the story. The night I finally decided to confront her, I felt a gnawing mix of anticipation and dread. I had spent days meticulously planning, and everything was set. I had the camera hidden in the corner of the living room, pointed at the couch where I knew she'd meet Alex again. The evidence was all there, timestamps, explicit messages, and the recordings I'd made of their secret meetings. It was enough to blow this whole thing apart. That evening I told her I was going out for a few hours, claiming I had to meet a friend from work. She rolled her eyes, bitchy as ever, and said she'd be hanging out with her so-called friends. I left the house, my heart pounding, knowing that everything was about to change. I went to a nearby coffee shop, pretending to be just another guy in the crowd, but really I was wired up, ready to catch her in the act. About an hour later, I saw her walk into that fancy restaurant again. I kept a safe distance, watching her on my phone. She was already waiting at a table with Alex. They exchanged smiles, a bit more intimate than usual. She leaned in, whispered something that made him laugh, and then they kissed. It happened so fast, but I'd seen enough. She was really doing it, cheating behind my back with my old friend from high school. I felt my fists clench. My stomach twisted in knots. I wanted to storm in and tear her apart, but I knew I had to stay calm. I kept recording, kept watching as they held hands across the table as she played the part of a woman in love. I saw her kiss him again before she left. That's when I knew I had everything I needed. I waited a little longer, then discreetly left the coffee shop, heading back home. I wanted to get there before she did so I could be ready for her. I was prepared to face whatever came next. When she finally got home, around 11 p.m., she looked annoyed, like I'd kept her waiting. She threw her coat on the hook and flopped onto the couch, acting like she'd had a long night with her friends. I sat silently in the corner, my camera in my pocket, feeling like a volcano ready to erupt. She started talking about her day, about her friends, but I didn't say a word. I just stared at her, waiting for the right moment. Finally, I pulled out my phone and showed her the footage. Every kiss, every touch, every moment they'd shared in that restaurant. Her face twisted into something ugly. She sputtered, denying everything, calling me crazy, accusing me of stalking her or losing my mind. But I didn't buy her bullshit anymore. I told her I had proof, that I knew exactly what she'd been doing behind my back. Then she snapped, going into her usual act, lashing out, calling me a jealous idiot, saying I was just insecure and controlling. She told me I was overreacting, that she loved me but needed space, needed to see if she still felt something for Alex. She said she was just curious, that it was nothing serious, just sex, just fun. The words made me sick. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she dismiss everything so casually? I felt my heart break in that moment. I realized then how much I'd been blind, how much I'd trusted her. And now it all felt like it was crumbling. I knew I had to make a choice. Either I let her keep lying, keep sneaking around, or I drew a line in the sand. I looked at her, tears welling up, and said I was done. I told her I wanted her out, that I couldn't be with someone who betrayed me like this. She laughed bitterly, said I was overreacting, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew I was serious. That's when she stormed off, crying, calling me names, trying to guilt-trip me, but I didn't care. I stood my ground. She had pushed me too far, crossed every line I had. I felt a strange sense of relief, even if I was devastated inside. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life again. As I watched her pack her bags that night, I understood something. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to repair. But I also saw that I deserved better. I deserved someone who didn't lie, who didn't cheat, who respected me enough to be honest. And as much as it hurt, I knew I'd survive this. I had to. Let me know if I should continue with part 5. Here is the 5th part of the story. That night I sat alone in the empty apartment, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. My mind kept racing over what I'd seen, what I'd done, what was coming next. I couldn't sleep, of course. How could I? My wife, no, ex-wife now, had cheated on me with Alex, someone I used to trust, someone I once called a friend. It was the kind of betrayal that hits you so deep. You start questioning every moment you ever shared with her. I remembered the moment I showed her the footage. Her face contorted into a mixture of panic and fury, like she couldn't believe I'd caught her. She tried to deny it, of course, said I was crazy, that I'd manipulated the footage, that I was just jealous. But I knew better. I had proof, cold and undeniable. She knew it too, and it scared her. That's why she was so angry, so defensive. I could see her trying to spin her lies, trying to convince herself she could get away with it, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I felt a strange sense of relief too. For so long I'd been trying to hold everything together, trying to be the good husband, the supportive one. But that night I finally realized I didn't have to accept being lied to. I could finally stand up for myself. That's what I did. I told her to leave. Told her I didn't want to see her face again until she was ready to be honest. She threw a tantrum, crying, yelling, accusing me of being cruel, controlling, and possessive. But I didn't care. Her words didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was that I refused to be played for a fool. The next morning she was gone. I watched her drive away in her car, her head held high, but I knew she was scared. She knew I had everything on her, the recordings, the evidence, the truth. And I wasn't planning to let her forget it any time soon. In the days that followed, I started to reclaim my life. I blocked her number, deleted her from social media, and cut all contact. I needed space to heal, to figure out what I wanted. I also reached out to some friends I trust, told them what happened, and asked for advice. Surprisingly, most of them told me I was better off without her, that she was a liar and a cheater, and that I deserved someone who genuinely cared. But even with all the support, I felt hollow inside. The betrayal cut so deep. I kept wondering how I missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind. I had loved her for so long, and now that love felt like a distant memory. I didn't know if I'd ever fully trust again, or if I'd be able to look at her the same way. That's the thing about betrayal, it changes you. It leaves scars you can't see, wounds that don't heal overnight. One thing I did realize, though, is that I was stronger than I thought. Yeah, I was hurt. Yeah, I felt broken, but I was still standing. That's what matters. I had survived the hardest thing I'd ever faced, being betrayed by someone I loved. And I was determined not to let this define me. I needed to find myself again, rebuild my confidence, and figure out what happiness looked like for me now. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I do know one thing. I won't be anyone's fool again. No more lies, no more betrayal. I'll take my time, heal, and move forward, better, smarter, and more cautious. Because sometimes life throws you into the fire, and all you can do is come out the other side stronger. Let me know if I should finish with part 6. Here is the final part of the story. Looking back now, I realize I've gone through a whirlwind of emotions: shock, anger, sadness, and finally, acceptance. Betrayal is a brutal teacher, but it also taught me a lot about myself. I learned that trust, once broken, takes a long time to repair, if it ever does. I learned that standing up for myself was necessary, even if it meant walking away from someone I once believed was my forever. And I learned that no matter how much you love someone, if they're willing to lie and cheat, they're not worth the pain. The hardest part was letting go, not just of Jennifer, but of all the hopes I'd held onto for so many years. The dreams of growing old together, of being there for each other through everything. That illusion shattered, and it left me with a stark truth. Some betrayals cut so deep, they change everything. But as much as it hurt, I also found a strange sense of liberation. I no longer had to walk on eggshells, second-guessing her every move. I no longer had to wonder if I was enough. I realized that I was, and that I deserved someone who was honest, respectful, and loyal. It's a hard lesson to learn. Trust is everything in a marriage, and once it's gone, it's almost impossible to get back. But sometimes losing trust is the only way to see the truth clearly. Now I focus on myself. I spend time with friends, rediscover hobbies I'd set aside, and slowly start building a life that doesn't revolve around betrayal. I won't say I'm completely healed. Those scars run deep, and I expect they always will. But I'm getting stronger day by day. This experience has hardened me in ways I never anticipated, but it's also made me more cautious about who I let into my life. For anyone reading this and going through something similar, I'll say this: trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the signs because you want to believe in forever. Protect your heart, and don't be afraid to walk away if you have to. Because at the end of the day, no one should settle for lies, betrayal, or a partner who doesn't respect you enough to be truthful. As for me, I'm taking it one day at a time. I don't have all the answers, and I'm still figuring out what happiness looks like now. But I do know this: my worth isn't defined by someone else's lies. I deserve honesty, loyalty, and love. And I refuse to let anything less define me. Thanks for reading. If you're in a similar situation, just remember, your happiness and self-respect come first. Don't settle for less. Life's too short. That's the end of the story.